Hey, what's going on everyone? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel, where you'll find some of the most fair and honest game reviews out here. Now, last year I reviewed the original BioShock for Halloween, which you guys can go check out here if you haven't already seen it. But I like the original BioShock, and many other people as well love that game. So finally, I get to talk about its sequel, BioShock 2. Now, this is a PlayStation 3 version of the game that's part of this collection, but the version I played for this review was for the PlayStation 4, played on a PS5, so it's the best version out now on the best hardware you could possibly play it on right now. That being said, however, is BioShock 2 much better than its predecessor? Does it do anything better than what came before? BioShock 2 was released for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC back in 2010. It's a sequel that takes place 8 years after the events of the first game, set in the underwater city of Rapture. However, unlike in the first game when we played as a guy named Jack, this time we're in control of a Big Daddy. Not gonna lie, it's pretty cool getting to step into the giant shoes of these tank-like baddies, even though narratively, things get a little bit messy. But I digress. Anyway, things start off in Rapture during the year of 1958. A Big Daddy known as Subject Delta is forced to kill itself by a woman named Sophia Lamb. She's a maniac who took control of Rapture after the death of Andrew Ryan in the first game. Sophia takes away a little sister named Eleanor, who is bonded to Subject Delta, and then continues to complete her takeover of Rapture. 10 years later, Subject Delta is resurrected by the little sisters and is tasked with finding Eleanor by a guy named Augustus Sinclair. If he doesn't do so and doesn't confront Sophia in the process, Subject Delta will die from the damaged psychic bond to Eleanor. Things get very weird, I know, and the story does get more wild as you go along. For me though, a lot of what made Rapture so interesting in the previous game just takes a backseat here. It's like the plot is just an after effect of everything that occurred in BioShock 1. Some might disagree with me, but that's how things came off overall. But does BioShock 2 still have enough impact to be just as good as its predecessor? That's a very tough question to ask, with possibly a very divisive answer for some.
At last, a signal. You, who are bringing this dead city to life, listen. My name, it is Tannenbaum. I know who you are, and I am in much need of your help. Please, find me in the Atlantic Express train station.
Now I'll be honest here, when things start off with BioShock 2's plot, it tends to be pretty good, but as the game starts to progress and you get really deeper into the story, I feel like the momentum starts to get gradually lost. Personally for me, I like that the story revolves around Sophia, being the main antagonist, and her daughter Eleanor, where things kind of come into play that it's pretty significant for Rapture. But one thing that I felt like the entire game lacked, or at least the plot and the story lacked, was a much more deeper connection to Rapture's origins, as well as also Andrew Ryan. The thing is that you do have Andrew Ryan's presence in all these different audio files and all these other stuff where he's mentioned by other characters, but with a sequel to probably one of the best FPSs out there, especially with Rapture and Andrew Ryan being such a big intricate part of that plot and how things were kind of built up to when you finally meet him, I didn't feel like BioShock 2 really followed up on that. It had an interesting story about what happens after Andrew Ryan and what happens after all those events, but as a follow-through, I just felt like something was missing there. And again, personally for me, I wish that we got a little bit more into the origins of Rapture and a little bit much more different than what the game presents to us here. Now, one thing I should say is that I did complete the DLC, which was called Minerva's Den. Now, that's a totally separate side story to what's going on in BioShock 2, and I totally get that there are some connections here and there with Rapture and certain people that were involved with certain experiments and other things that were happening. But when you really look at it, it's just its own little separate thing. So if you love BioShock 2 or you like BioShock storytelling as it is, you're probably going to like Minerva's Den. It's just more of the same, just a different set of characters and a different story that's, again, offshoot or parallel, or I don't even know how to really think about it. It just takes place maybe after BioShock 2. It's just a little bit confusing with that regard, but if you like BioShock 2's narrative, you'll probably like that as well. Anyway, let's get into the gameplay and actually see if this sequel really lived up to the hype or even surpassed its predecessor in some way. For some people, maybe, maybe not. For me, it's a little bit complicated. There's very little different in BioShock 2's gameplay compared to the first game. Dare I say, they're almost identical in nearly every way. There's plenty of good weapons to use, with a couple new ones like the Big Daddy drill. And there's also the fizzy plasmids and tonics that give you all sorts of powers and abilities to use against the splicers. All of that is still pretty cool. However, there are a few other things I could comment on that changes things up from before. The biggest standout to me is how much heavier I felt moving around. It's probably because I'm controlling a Big Daddy instead of a regular human, but my movements just felt sluggish overall. There is a tonic that you can find that helps speed up your movements, but it's really not by much. I don't know about all of you, but I definitely felt the difference in my time playing through BioShock 2. Another thing that I did notice was how the game gets pretty cheap with the damage output from enemies in the middle and later sections of the game. The damage you take isn't always consistent, and you're constantly looking for health pickups at the worst of times. Like usual, I played the game on normal and expected a challenge, but there were moments where I felt the damage from basic enemies was just super ludicrous, with attacks that really impacted me far more than you would expect. This ended up being fatal a few times and knocking me back to the nearest Vita chamber, but luckily the game allows for infinite respawns. I just got annoyed every time I had to retrace my steps and redo sections whenever it happened. But by far my worst experience is when the game crashed on me a few times during some big moments of progression. This really sucked and was totally unexpected. I was able to reload my save that put me somewhat close to where it happened, but it was still frustrating regardless. The worst part is when I didn't have a clear reason for why this was happening. The only common thing that I noticed when it was going down was every time I would get into a fight with two big enemies that were nearby that enter combat. Like if a Big Daddy or a Big Sister showed up while a group of splicers were attacking me nearby. These were always the coolest moments to me in the original BioShock, but these could have also been the reason why this was going haywire in this game. Something I can say that I really like about BioShock 2 is the addition of new enemies into this game, more specifically, the Big Sisters. This is cool and very ironic because the Big Daddies were pretty much the best aspects of the first BioShock. Every time you encountered one of those things, they were the most interesting. And it feels like the same thing here with the Big Sisters every time you run into one or one just kind of like shows up when you're trying to do other stuff. They fight very differently, you have to approach the encounter much differently than what you would with the Big Daddies. They're just, overall, in my opinion, a very cool concept and feel like a natural progression and evolution of what the Big Daddies were in the first game. At the same time though, one of the more annoying enemies that's exclusive to BioShock 2 that I found just to be a real pain in the butt to deal with are the brute splicers, because not only do they feel like bullet sponges, but just their damage output, for whatever reason, every time I ran into one of these things, and it happens a lot, they just deal so much damage to me and it just feels so inconsistent. You could probably say the same thing about the Big Sisters, because those are like boss encounters every time you run into one, and towards the end of the game you have to fight two of them at the same time, which is pretty tough. However, I would argue that your encounters with the brute splicers are a little bit much more annoying and more challenging than the Big Sisters. The reason being is because with the brutes, you have to run into multiple of them at the same time in certain encounters. Sometimes the game is like throwing 3 or 4 of these things at you, and they're just constantly just aggressively attacking you, and it's super annoying. Even though I'm dogging them with bullets, I'm hitting them with plasmids, that stuff just gets really frustrating, really annoying, and I'm guaranteeing you there'll be more than a few times where you get knocked back to a Vita chamber in order to redo the fight all over again. So one other thing I should mention before I forget is that BioShock 2 actually had some multiplayer modes from back in its original release. However, with all the re-releases on all these collections, they removed all the multiplayer modes, so I kind of can't play them. And don't get me wrong, I have seen the multiplayer mode footage, and I've actually dabbled a little bit with it back during its original release because I had friends that played BioShock and they were kind of into it. But for me personally, there's not really much lost here by taking out the multiplayer modes. It's not something that I would have really been into. To me, BioShock as a franchise is really all about the single player experience, that core story that you're going to follow, and just the atmosphere of Rapture or wherever else you're going to be located in. It's not really something that I feel like was really tailored to having a multiplayer mode that would have been like elaborate or awesome, at least from what I saw back then. So it really doesn't factor into my review, or at least the lack of it not being here at all whatsoever. There's no real value lost here because we still have the single player experience of BioShock 2, and to me, that's what really matters at the end of the day. With all of that being said, can I recommend that you check out BioShock 2 on any platform? I would say yes, you should, but only if you're really into BioShock already. Like if you've already played the first game or the next one that released afterwards and enjoyed either one, you'll more than likely appreciate what's going on with BioShock 2. It's more BioShock gameplay with more story to take in, but little insignificant changes from before. To be completely honest, I don't feel this is better than the first game. I find the gameplay is good with some hiccups that could have used some more tweaks, but also the game crashes were a unique detriment to my own experience that may or may not be there for everyone who plays. Overall, this is a fairly good game that tried hard to be a good follow-up to its predecessor, only to come out with just okay results.
The raptured dream is over, but in waking, I am reborn. This world is not ready for me, yet here I am. It would be so easy to misjudge them. You are my conscience, Father, and I need you to guide me.
And there you go, everyone. Those are my overall thoughts about BioShock 2. Not this version specifically, just the one on PS4. And what's funny enough, I'm looking at the back of the box here. This is the version that actually has the multiplayer modes in it, but I doubt anybody's playing this right now, or at least cares to play this at the moment. So overall, I feel like I like the first game better than I do the second. Now, I might be in the minority with that, or at least there's some people that I know personally that love BioShock 2 much more than the first game. But when it comes to my review and the way that I see this game, now having played both of them at this point, I feel like, the atmosphere and just as an overall package, BioShock 1 is the better game to me. It just felt like everything came together so much more better, and everything else as far as like the cons, and besides like the crashes and stuff, I didn't really get that in my experience with the first game. But that doesn't go to say that this game is garbage. I don't think BioShock 2 is garbage by any stretch. However, if you want my own personal recommendation, play the first game before you play this, or just play the first game and you should be good to go. But like always, with any game that I review on this channel, that's just my opinion about BioShock 2. Let me know your own thoughts about this game down below in the comment section. Tell me, are you a fan of BioShock in general? Do you like BioShock 2 more than you do BioShock 1, or the reverse of that? What are some other first-person games that you really love to play that probably are more narratively driven than just gameplay? The ones that you would recommend to a friend if they really want to get into first-person shooters. Talk to me about that stuff down below in the comment section. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching this video. I appreciate your support and all your good vibes as always. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon too to support my channel for new videos each week. You could also join my Patreon for early access to brand new videos and other exclusive content. Don't forget to join my Discord server too and be part of the community I have over here. If you're into games, then you'll love interacting with all the great people who are part of it. Thanks again, guys. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.